Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. So we are hopping back in to the 40K universe today, and we're checking out one of the Primarch videos by my boy the Amber King. We're gonna look at Corvus Corax entire character history, voice acted 40K lore. You know, we took a look at the Raven Guard Legion from Arbiturian a while back. Haven't been able to sit down and get to this video until now, so we're getting to it. And yeah, so we're gonna check this out here today. As always, links will be down below in the description for the Amber King's channel and to this original video without my commentary, without my reaction. If you would do me a favor, if you enjoy, you know, watching along with this video with me, click the links down below, give the Amber King's video a like, check out his channel. He makes a lot of Warhammer 40K content. A lot of it is very detailed about various characters and voice acted. So he makes a lot of great content. Check out his stuff, give him a sub if you would like to, and check out any other ways to support him. So yeah, we are going to just hop in this video. As you can see here, we're doing this reaction live for my YouTube members. So if you would like to come and join in any of the discussions as we do these live reactions, there is a join button somewhere down below. You can click it and see if any of the YouTube tiers that I offer have any interest to you. But for now, we are going to get into this video. Again, Corvus Corax, the entire character history, voice acted 40K lore. Volume up, let's go. Oh, what's up, man? How you doing, brother?
Incarnate. I am justice delivered, and I embrace my destiny. I will not let my suffering consume me. Nevermore.
Nevermore, he says. Okay. Okay, William. Mr. Shakespeare. Or no, it was Edgar Allan Poe. What am I talking about? I'm getting that wrong, too.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly, I wished the morrow. Vainly, I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Nameless here, forevermore.
I used to think there was a righteous justice, that whatever I did, it served humanity. There is only one way left to aid mankind, and it does not include our survival. This is not our universe, and it never was. You cannot create legends and myths in a laboratory.
That sounds like a quote that Conrad would say, honestly. Let me go back here just for a second. I used to think there was a righteous justice that whatever I did, it served humanity. That sounds very much like something Conrad would say. His whole his twisted idea of justice and punishing the wicked severely, but also his twisted idea of, you know, he's punishing the wicked, but he also just is doing it because he enjoys the act of hunting people down and killing them. So it's interesting that these two, you know, Conrad and Corvus, look alike. They also seem to have a similar ideal of justice, and that whatever they did, no matter what, served humanity and the greater good of mankind, and potentially the Emperor, and so that they couldn't necessarily do any wrong. So I find that very interesting. There's only one way left to aid mankind, and it does not include our survival. This is not our universe and it never was. You cannot create legends and myths in a laboratory. And that's one of the things that also, from what I remember, kind of like messed up Conrad too, was, I mean, he had the gift of premonition and foresight. So the main thing that really messed with him was him seeing himself being killed by an assassin sent by the Emperor. So the idea that his father, he had this idea in his mind that his father never cared for him, never really loved him. So he had like this huge kind of abandonment thing going on. But that also that, you know, the Emperor was going to kill him eventually. He was going to do something and the Emperor was going to eventually kill him. And so he thought that there was no way that that could ever be changed. And so, yeah, that just like kind of really broke his mind. So I wonder, the statement here of cannot create legends and myths in a laboratory, that feels somewhat similar in certain ways. Well, it's funny, Conrad became disenfranchised with the Imperium first and then turned traitor, but Corvus became disenfranchised after all the shit he went through during the war, but doubled down on his loyalty to his sons. Yeah. It's going good, Ben. Welcome, man. Glad to see you in here. Glad to see you in here for your first reaction stream. So I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good day. Yeah, both of them are very into justice, but different aspects of it. Gotcha. Okay. All right, so let's continue.
Loved humanity. There is only one way left to aid mankind, and it does not include our survival. This is not our universe, and it never was. You cannot create legends and myths in a laboratory. The savior of deliverance, the Raven Lord, Corvus Corax, a man who ponders weak and weary, lost in the melancholy of a cruel universe, or vengeance incarnate. The Black Death to the traitors of the Imperium, the Primarch of the 19th, the Raven Guard. He's a figure of myth to a story told and retold thousands of times. A lord to a legion that stalks the enemies of the Imperium, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the killing blow before melting back into the darkness once more. But who is the Raven Lord? Who is Corvus Corax? How did he wage war? How did he think? How did he endure? His story begins in the 30th millennium. A child rested within a gestation capsule. Brief glints of a face were seen through the cracks of his eyelids. It felt like a...
It's pretty much how every Primarch story starts. You know, they're on an alien planet, they wake up as a child, and they have to survive, right? I don't really know of the stories that we've gone through so far, other than I think maybe Jagatai. I don't think any of the Primarchs have, like, as soon as they crash landed, they were like immediately found and weren't put in some kind of life or death survival situation, right? Like, I'm trying to think. You know, Lionel Johnson had to survive in his harsh wilderness for a long time before he was found by the knights on his world. Kind of similar with Jagatai, but I think Jagatai was found a little earlier on by who he would kind of come to think of as his father, the leader of their tribe. You know, Alfarius for a long time was by himself. Omegon was by himself for a long time. Conrad, you know, was on his own pretty much throughout. He never really had anyone that he found and attached himself to. So it seems like that's pretty much like a theme across the board with all the Primarchs. They kind of, whatever planet they've gone to, there's at least a pretty good period of time where they have to get used to being alone and surviving on their own before they're found by some kind of semblance of humanity and are then shown what it is to be human. All right, well, unfortunately, YouTube seems to be conspiring against me, even though my internet appears to be fine on my end. For whatever reason, I'm dropping frames when connected to YouTube. I've tried swapping the various ingest servers, all the ones that are available, and no matter what, after about 5-10 minutes, I start dropping frames. Don't know why. Again, it doesn't seem to be anything on my end, so we're just going to finish up doing this reaction off stream. So I apologize to my live stream members. We'll make it up to you guys another time in another video. But anyway, I guess let's continue where we left off on this video here.
Dream, but everything changed. Rested within a gestation capsule. Brief glints of a face were seen through the cracks of his eyelids. It felt like a dream, but everything changed as this capsule, deep in the earth of terror, was ripped out, torn into the tide of the reflective plane of madness, the warp. Claws scraped against the glass and metal. Creatures of sentient thought were trying to break in. The capsule was strung along these ocean tides until it suddenly burst back into real space, and a young boy emerged from the wreckage. It was cold. The capsule had crashed and sunk deep into the core of a world, the moon of Lycaeus, deep beneath a frozen glacier. The boy looked around himself, rationalizing and understanding his environment in a way that was beyond human.
It is also interesting to me that so far, anyway, from all the videos I've done in the various Primarchs, that none of them really were injured, it seems, when they've landed on the planet. So I guess, obviously, whatever gestation pods they were in when they were scattered were made of some pretty stern stuff and were able to take a beating. But anyway, yeah, I just found that interesting that none of them really kind of came out of there injured and were pretty much just able to go on, you know what I mean?
Where was he? He had no memory of how he was here. Who was he? Number 19. There was something he knew deep inside the core of his being. He was number 19. In a situation where any of us would be overtaken by fear and dread, he showed none of this, only simple confusion. Voices. The boy began to hear voices getting closer, and the sound of a high-pitched buzzing. Moments later, the small chamber the boy and his capsule wreckage occupied was broken into. Men and women in blue overalls, carrying strange machinery, peered into the chamber of near.
So he was found by people right off the bat, which was actually kind of going against what I was saying earlier, that so far of all the Primarch videos that I've gone through, all of them have been put pretty much in like an instant survival situation once they've landed and got out of their pod. But it seems like he was, you know, specifically found by people almost instantly.
Darkness, carrying strange machinery, peered into the chamber of near darkness and was stunned. A child with deathly pale white skin.
That's cool art.
And midnight black eyes. They would come to see more than most mortals could ever dream. These were the first humans the boy had ever seen. A voice called from behind them, screaming at them for stopping. A large man then stepped forward, wearing a different uniform and carrying a whip in his hand. His shouting stopped as he glanced at the strange child. It was impossible to find someone here. A small girl stepped out from the machinery, trying to peer at the commotion. The man with the whip told her to get back, snatching hold of the young girl's hair. The young boy did not like this man. He hated his unjust cruelty. He hated the noise of the girl screaming. We all remember that anger. It comes from witnessing cruel men bully others, especially someone who couldn't protect themselves. The boy lunged forward, slamming the vile man to the ground, and then pulling off his head, offering it to the small girl. She smiled as—
Jesus. Okay, I mean, you imagine the crowd of people sitting there seeing that, right? Like, this they find this pod with some kid who's got jet black eyes, obviously, you know, not normal. And then some, you know, overseer with the whip, you know, tries to get his people back in line from what he knows, grabs this girl seemingly unjustly, and then, you know, this crowd sees this young child then attack this person and rip his head off with his bare hands and then offers it to this girl. Like, that would be a spectacle to see.
As the human his head, offering it to the small girl. She smiled.
And then she
as the
smiles.
humans in blue overalls began to panic. Her name was Euphrenia Nasturi. She asked his name. He was 19. Number 19.
11.
The child had been discovered kilometers underground, packed around rock and ice. The blue uniformed humans were afraid, but also intrigued. Something was different about this child.
No shit.
His speed.
No shit, something's different about this child. He has the physical capability of ripping another human being's head off. Like, not even a grown man could just physically, like, boop, just pop someone's head off. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's built different.
Something was different about this child. His speed, his strength, the sheer aura of majesty that overtook them when they glimpsed him. He was special. He was a jewel found under ice and stone. Something that had to be hidden from the men with whips.
So they immediately felt like they need to protect him from whatever his overseer caste is. Interesting.
Terra. The epicenter of the emerging imperium of mankind. It is the late 30th millennium, and a great host of warships, numbering in their thousands, are launching to the stars to reunite the lost colonies of mankind. The Great Crusade had begun. The Emperor, a figure of immense power, is seeking to bring humanity out of the horror of the age of strife, but he also seeks to find his sons. His Primarchs, scattered to the stars by creatures of sentient nightmare. Like how the Primarchs were sons to him, the Emperor created legions of warriors that were sons to them. The Legiones Astartes. It was the 19th, the Raven God, who were created with the meshing of tribal humans on Terra and the gene seed of an ashen-skinned, dark-eyed boy, whose location was thought to have been all but lost. The 19th Legion launched with the Great Crusade, absent of a Primarch, and quickly built a bloody reputation. Its warriors' capacity to switch from cold, impassive scrutiny to swift, brutal action soon made the Legion the subject of dread amongst those who would deny unity with the Imperium. They were brutal and efficient, but oppressive and uncaring. They were cut from the same cloth as the men with whips, the men that the young boy despised.
Interesting.
Millions of miles away.
Interesting that his legion is compared to, like he says, the humans that he's interacted with so far that he despises, these men with whips. So I find that interesting. I wonder how that interaction is going to go once he actually is introduced to his legion.
The men that the young boy despised. Millions of miles away in Segmentum Tempestus, the strange boy had arrived alone on the moon of Lycaeus. He had landed on a prison world that orbited the world of Kievar. The human.
Interesting. So he landed on a prison world. So, I mean, obviously, the majority of people there are probably criminals. And you would assume that then these people with whips are the, police, the jailers, enforcers. But it could also potentially be the other way around. Maybe it is supposed to be a jailed world, but, the criminals have taken over. And so it's been like a flipped situation where, the jailers, the ones who are supposed to be jailed are actually in charge now. I don't know. Interesting.
Humans in blue overalls were slaves, innocent or not. Thousands from the planet of Kievar had been cast to this brutal mining prison. Generations condemned to a lifetime of service in the cold and dark mines of this moon by its tyrannical ruling tech guilds. They were a malnourished, tortured people who faced cruelty and injustice daily. It was these people that found the strange child, buried deep amongst rock and ice. The prisoners of Lycaeus took him in. They saw that he was special and feared what would happen to him if enslaved by the prison overseers. They gave him shelter, they gave him sustenance, and they gave him love. And they gave him...
So it's interesting that he immediately, like, found a group of people to connect with and that cared for him and took care of him, while also immediately finding a group of people to oppose, or like he felt opposed to, because they were treating these other people cruelly and unjustly. So I'm just kind of like thinking about the comparison of him to Conrad, because they're, you know, very similar characters, but, you know, Conrad, the first thing that he did was essentially find this criminal and kill him, and then like consumed him, and then was able to, I guess, somehow relive his memories. You know what I'm saying? So like he was able to imprint his memories. So I don't know. Very interesting.
Gave him a name, gave him sustenance, and they gave him love, and they gave him a name, Corvus Corax.
The Raven.
The prisoners put their own lives at risk to keep him safe. They gave him their wisdom, as the boy received lessons on philosophy and politics. With their frozen fingers they sewed him clothes that didn't fit for long, as the boy began aging faster than any mortal man. He had friends, such as the small girl Euphronia Nasturi, and others, like the brothers Bran and Agapito Nev. He had connections.
You know, I wonder if any of the Primarchs, you know, before they were discovered, or rediscovered, I should say, by the Emperor, like, on the worlds they were on, did they ever come, you know, did they ever, like, start any families? Did they get married, engaged, or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Did they have any families that they started before the Emperor then refound them and was like, hey, you have a higher calling, you need to come do this?
Connections to ordinary people. Corax spent years in the dark and damp conditions in the subterranean prison. He was impressive, gifted with an innate fierce intelligence, and imbued with a natural sense of justice
That's all of them
that was
have, man.
tempered by his teachers, who understood the importance of teaching him humanity and patience. He was gifted in other ways too. When one night, under the tutelage of one of his teachers, a surprise inspection caught them off guard, Corax was almost found. As the guards peeked into his hiding spot, he was ready to fight, preparing to rip them apart. But when the guards looked directly at him, there was silence. They didn't see him. His will to hide had manifested physically. Corax had already made the shadows his home, but that night he became its master. He could make people
molded by it,
not perceive him. Corax began to explore the prison, growing and learning from the millions who suffered under this unjust, tyrannical rule. He was born with a complex understanding of science and technology, but he was complete by love, the people of Lycaeus' love.
That is the interesting thing compared to obviously Conrad, Conrad, is that he had people immediately there to help him and take care of him versus Conrad, who didn't. And it's also interesting that most other Primarchs, while eventually the Primarchs that I've gone through anyway, they've eventually found people to take care of them. But a lot of them were in kind of life or death survival situations right from the beginning, where they really had to learn how to take care of themselves and survive. So I wonder if how, like, him finding attachment early on to people, like, affected him versus some of the other Primarchs. You know what I mean? Like, he's not in, I mean, to an extent, he's in he's not as like in a critical life or death situation where it's like he's literally out in the wilderness on his own having to survive, like Lionel Johnson or Alferis and Omegon, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But he is in a situation where he's essentially kind of being hunted almost. You know, he has to keep himself hidden from these overseers, and these prisoners are taking care of him. So he, I'm sure, feels an obligation to take care of them as well and protect them. So I feel like that would probably really play into his sense of justice. You know what I mean? Like having those attachments early on and having people to care for and take care of, as well as having people to care for and take care of him. You know, that must have been kind of a big difference compared to a lot of other Primarchs. And I guess potentially with his view on humanity, you know, he might have a better view of humanity than a lot of the other Primarchs and Astartes do because of that. I don't know. I just wonder how that affects him and whatnot in the future.
They gave him everything, and so now the young man, who for years had seen how his family had been mistreated, made a vow. He promised to free them. Corax planned for war.
Deliverance.
Yes, you have brothers.
Said the Emperor, smiling at his son's delight.
17 of them. You are the Primarchs, my finest creations.
17?
Corvus asked, confused.
I remember that I was number 19. How can that be so?
The Emperor's expression grew bleak, filled with deep sorrow. He looked away as he replied.
The other two?
He said.
That is a conversation for another day.
Interesting.
Where are my brothers now? Are they with you?
That seems to imply, obviously, that something went wrong with them in some way, shape, or form. I still very much want to know if one of them is the person who's locked away by the custodians or whatever. I forget what it is, but there's some kind of like prison underneath the Imperial Palace, I think, like the custodians have access to or look after. There's, I guess, a being in there marked number 11, I think. So it's an indication that he could potentially be, you know, one of the Primarchs, and he's, you know, whether it was willing or not, has locked himself away. But I wonder if you know, I know that originally Games Workshop kind of made it as a situation to where they could, you know, you could homebrew your own Primarch and Legion kind of a situation. So that's why they kind of left, I guess, 2 Legion spots or whatever open. You could have like, maybe you could homebrew one good one bad one or something like that. I don't know. But I wonder if they're ever going to like really flesh that out at some point in time in the future with what really happened to these other 2 legions and Primarchs and why. I wonder if they're ever going to actually get into that. It'd be interesting. But anyway, let's get back into this.
Another day.
Where are my brothers now? Are they with you?
You and the other Primarchs were snatched from me by the strange powers of the warp, thrown across the galaxy on unnatural tides. That is how you came to rest beneath a glacier on this moon. Yes, I have seen what befell you, learning your life the moment I laid eyes upon you. The rumor of you, of a magnificent being who led a rebellion here, has traveled farther than you realize. And it was word of this that attracted my attention. Your brothers, those I have found, were similarly scattered to far-flung worlds. Like you, they are all great warriors and leaders. That was my gift to you. You are supreme commanders, with intellect and physical ability unmatched by anything in the mass of humanity. I engineered you from my own genetic structure to be my sons and my lieutenants in the Great Crusade.
What is this crusade? How many of my brothers have you found?
Most of them,
replied the Emperor,
I have vast armies, the Legiones Astartes. As you are crafted from me, so they are crafted from you. The Primarchs are the generals of those armies, leading humanity's reconquest of the galaxy. The long night, the age of strife, has ended. The remnants of the old empires smolder out in the darkness, the dying coals of humanity almost smothered by dark. The Great Crusade fans the flames into life, bringing with it reason to drive out superstition, enlightenment to replace barbarism. With your help, I will unite humanity and lead mankind to rule the stars.
There was so much to take in, but Corvus knew it to be true. Not only the words of the Emperor seemed certain, the idea of what he described messed with a much deeper feeling.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine that? Like, even being someone like a Primarch, where you have like a sense, you know, probably a greater sense of purpose that's been engineered into you, but also just the idea, like, the Emperor literally said to him, I engineered you. Like, saying that straight off the bat, like, that still has to, like, on some level kind of mess with you. Like, okay, you built me. I'm not just a normal human being that was, you know, made through, you know, the love of two adult people, you know, kind of a situation. Or, you know, you literally, like, engineered me and built me from scratch. So, I mean, there's that aspect of it. But then there's also the aspect of, like, yeah, you know, I am seeking to go out into the universe to essentially reclaim what humanity once had, which was the stars and is our birthright, and we're going out there to do this again, and you're a part of it, and etc. You know, like, that's still got to be a lot to take in, you know, and not to mention you're also finding out that you all have brothers who are, you know, potentially someone that can be on equal terms with you when you've, like, literally grown up in a situation where you've really just had normal humans to deal with, not even like Astartes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's basically like being Superman on Earth, you know, having to, as he's stated, walk around on, you know, eggshells and do his very best not to break something. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm sure it would be nice to, you know, find a group of people that you could actually open up and be yourself around. But then also to find out that you've got, like, it must be a weird sensation too to, like, know that, yes, you're going out and being an instrument of war, and you also have essentially an army of your sons. You know, like, when you think about it, like, okay, you crafted me, you engineered me, built me in your image, and then you took me in my image and you made an army of children for me in my image. Like, that's also got to be something weird, you know? Anyway.
The idea of what he described messed with a much deeper feeling, knowing he was a Primarch, that he had been created to fight and to command, explained much that Corvus had never understood about himself, on a level that he understood in his spirit, and was encoded into every cell of his body. Corvus knew what he was.
I swear my loyalty to you,
said Corvus, sinking to one knee in front of the Emperor. He met the Emperor's gaze, and felt elation like no victory had given him before.
I am your son, your Primarch, and your will shall be my command.
That is good,
said the Emperor.
I have an army waiting for you. They are the Raven Guard, highly decorated and distinguished in my campaigns already. When you are ready, you will assume command of the Legion.
Am I not ready now?
Corvus said, having been elevated and then deflated by the Emperor's words.
Not yet, my son,
said the Emperor.
But soon you will emerge to join your brothers and take your place at my side, and at the head of the Raven Guard. First, though, Tell me of Kiavar. What are your intentions?
To bring peace to both the world and its moon, and to heal the wounds of the past,
said Corvus.
With your help, I will succeed.
Peace is the hardest goal to achieve. Victory, the cessation of war, the demilitarization of our opponents. These we can obtain with might of arms and perseverance. Peace, that is an altogether different beast.
Corvus frowned, but nodded slowly. The Emperor sipped from his glass, his gaze unmoving.
Tell me again, then. Tell me of the wounds you and your followers inflicted upon this world, and of the peace you would bring to it with my help.
The boy had become
It's almost like an ultimative kind of thing. Like, okay, I'll do this thing for you and give you help to create this peace on this planet, but once that happens, you're mine and you do what I tell you to do, kind of a situation, you know?
a man filled with an absolute hatred for the oppressor and cruel. Corax vowed to free the people who had cared for him. He felt for them. He truly cared. He began to plot. Using his gift of near invisibility, Corax explored far into the other complexes of the prison world, speaking to the people, the young and old, the innocent and guilty. Thousands were awestruck by the majesty of this demigod figure. You could imagine being in front of him, emotions of wonder that spilled forth, but yet also some fear too, as you realized he could crush you without effort. Corax created a network, links on a chain, bonded by unjust cruelty and oppression. Corax as a lone figure mastered the shadows, even hiding in plain sight in front of the cruel overseers. After years of patience, gathering intel, supplies, and willing recruits, they were ready, and Corax and his million-strong slave army rose up. The conflict was brutal. Many thousands gave their lives for freedom, young and old alike. No matter how long Corax lived, he would always be haunted by what he had asked of his people, even remembering a young 13-year-old girl who gave her life in a sabotage mission.
It's interesting. You would think, you know, they would have brought some of his troops, you know, some of his Astartes, and that would have made a difference. I don't know.
Some never got the chance of freedom, poisoned by the overseers in an attempt to punish the rebels. Corax gave special treatment to those who delved to such depravity. The family that had raised the Primarch fought with him, side by side, until millions like Euphronia Nastori, Bran, and Agapito Nev breathed their first free air. Lysaeus was free, and at the zenith of this victory a golden eagle stormbird descended from the sky. Golden light spilled out from its ramparts. The rebels murmured with wonder and cried tears of joy. Corax simply saw a normal man, until when the figure came close enough, he was hit by a wave of reverence. A golden warrior, so majestic, so perfect. Wisdom poured from the stranger's eyes. It was his father, the Emperor of mankind. The Emperor had come for his son, and the two spoke for hours, the awkwardness of strangers quickly fading.
You know, it's also something like Corvus got the chance to actually talk to the Emperor. I don't think Conrad got a chance to talk to the Emperor until near the end, when he had his like mental breakdown, and it's questionable whether he actually spoke with the Emperor or if it was just, you know, some kind of vision. I think the Emperor came to him and actually spoke to him. That's my interpretation of it, but it could have been just, you know, him having a fever dream kind of a situation. But it's interesting that he actually got to talk to the Emperor as well, and I wonder how much, again, you know, that changed his outcome versus Conrad. Oh, excuse me. I'm comparing them often because they're very similar characters. They're basically kind of the same character. They're like two sides of the same coin kind of a situation. And I'm just kind of, as we're going through this, like going through their different upbringings, kind of the differences in how they were raised, and the fact, again, that, you know, Corvus actually got to speak to the Emperor early on after being introduced to, you know, the Crusade. I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering, and Conrad actually did too. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like I remember him not really meeting the Emperor or having like any kind of meaningful conversation with him until later on, because of the fact that he had that premonition that the Emperor was going to send an assassin to kill him. So I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering, but anyway.
Corax had always been aware of his uniqueness. He had gifts and intellect that was beyond any mortal, but this also isolated him too. Even his friends looked at him with wonder. Now in the ashes of victory and freedom, he wasn't Corvus Corax to them. He was the savior. But the Emperor told him of his brothers, his equals, people who could truly understand him. He was elated, perhaps deep down relieved that there was a way to alleviate the loneliness that comes from leadership. The Emperor asked Corax his intentions, to bring peace to both the world and
a clean pair of shorts.
Thank you for that sub. I don't know why my alerts are going off, but appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Its moon, and to heal the wounds of the past. It was in a way naive. Peace is the hardest goal to achieve, and Corax needed to learn the truth about the hard road to peace. The Emperor left Corax to finish the war he had started, returning when he was ready. Lysaeus was free and renamed to Deliverance, but the moon was still in danger from the tech guilds on the planet Kievar. The rebels were outnumbered.
That's kind of interesting, a little poetic, I guess, you know, the idea that he changed the name to Deliverance to deliver the planet to his people, kind of a situation, I would assume.
Still in danger from the tech guilds on the planet Kievar. The rebels were outnumbered, facing a superior force in technology and numbers. Even as the guild sought to launch a counterattack, Corax knew the terrible order he must give. Using the steep gravity well that tethered Kievar and its moon, the Primarch committed a full-scale atomic bombardment of the vast Manufactorum cities below. Victory was achieved. Thousands died, but millions were saved. At least, that is how Corax justified it. Even as men, women, and children burned on the surface.
You know, I wonder, like, 'cause at this point, the Emperor's already with him and he's had that talk, right? So, like, maybe the Emperor's just sitting back and watching and letting him do his own thing. But you would also think that, like, you know, in these situations with the Empire expanding or the Imperium expanding, etc., having a manufacturing planet would be pretty valuable, you would think. So, like, oh, hey, can't stop yawning. You would think that the Emperor would kind of be like, hey, yo, like, do your thing, but, you know, we could use the manufacturing plants on this planet to, like, you know, boost some shit in the Imperium, you know what I'm saying? Get some production going, so try not to break everything, but who am I?
As each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor.
The Great Crusade.
The first axiom of victory is to be other than where the enemy desires you to be. The first axiom of stealth is to be other than where the enemy believes you to be. The first axiom of freedom is that justice without force is powerless. Force without justice is tyranny. The war was over. Thousands lay dead because of the actions of Corax. He had learnt the lesson the Emperor
Like
had
millions,
spoken
right?
of. Peace was the hardest thing to achieve. Corax now had to heal the wounds of the past, the hatred of the enslaved, and the hatred of the previous enslavers. But this goal of the Savior of Deliverance would have to be put on hold, as something greater required his blood, sweat, and tears, the Great Crusade. With the liberation of Deliverance and the surrender of Kievar, the system was brought into the fold of the Imperium. Corax held true to the vows he gave that day he met his father. I am your son, your Primarch, and your will shall be my command. As a leader of a rebellion, Corax had no true experience of war, armies, supply lines, sieges, or logistics, and spent some time under the tutelage of the Emperor and his brother Rabute Gilliman, his Primarch brain absorbing the information in a way that he was able to add his own thoughts and perspective to it. Even spending time with his brother Fulgrim, before a boy who grew up in damp and claustrophobic conditions, he found no comfort in the lavish halls of the 3rd Legion. Opulence was too much of a reminder of his people's oppressors, and he was more at home.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say anything that would be like, I guess, of like, I don't know, prestigiousness, you know, royalty, higher living, whatever you want to say, upper class stuff. I feel like he would probably shun away from, or would make him feel weird, you know? I don't know.
Home in humble place, a reminder of his people's oppressors, and he was more at home in humble places. When he was ready, his father gifted him his sons, the 19th, the Raven Guard Legion, thousands of warriors created from his own genetic material. But when Corax met with his sons, he was not impressed. The 19th Legion had over a century of conflict under their belt, and had brought thousands of worlds into Imperial compliance. But the way they fought disgusted the Primarch, often using their tactics of infiltration to place themselves behind enemy lines, to enact cruelty, and to cut down retreating survivors. They had developed a culture of being cold-blooded killers.
Interesting. So yeah, they use themselves. They essentially are killing people who are retreating. Essentially leave no survivors. Kind of a situation. So that is pretty fascinating. And that goes along the lines with how Conrad kind of worked, right? You know, he was very brutal in his tactics, and wasn't also just about killing them, but was also very much about torturing and setting an example so that others... Essentially, he was terrible to those against the Imperium to set an example for them so that others would see it and think to not turn against the Imperium beforehand. The idea being, you know, I do these terrible acts to the few so that I can save the lives of the many.
They had developed a culture of being cold-blooded killers, uncaring brutes, who took joy in oppressing those that they saw as beneath them. Several of the Legion's high-ranking officers were displaced or reassigned to non-command roles, including Lord Arcus Fall, who had commanded the 19th for over 3 decades. Veterans who had fought since the early days by even Horus's side were banished, given autonomy to fight far from their Primarch. With Legion and Primarch reunited, the 19th could become a fully fledged member of the Great Crusade. But for this path it needed more warriors, and who better than the warriors of Just Heart? The free people of Deliverance chose to follow their savior. Many of us understand what it is like to truly believe in someone and be willing to go to hell and back for them. In their thousands they joined. Many like Euphemia, the girl who had been with him since the start, joined the ranks of the crew and maintenance, and for many others like Agapito and Bran, they gave themselves to something higher, as many of the young boys who gave their blood in the name of liberation joined the ranks of the Legiones Astartes. Corax's family followed him to war, to the stars, and Corax valued them, for they understood his values. The first axiom of freedom is that justice without force is powerless. Force without justice is tyranny. Corax wanted to wage a just war. He had to fight for something right, and he found that in the liberation for the slaves of deliverance. And again, he found it in the imperial truth. The long night, the age of strife has ended. The remnants of the old empires smolder out in the darkness. The dying coals of humanity almost smothered by the dark. The Great Crusade fans the flames into life, bringing with it reason to drive out superstition, enlightenment to replace barbarism. Corax, his family, and his legion headed to war. Take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder, and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy, and yet you act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some righteousness in which the universe may be judged. What is just? Is one person's justice someone else's injustice?
True.
We are all
True. A lot of the stuff is based on perspective and life experience. So, I mean, yeah, what one person sees as a cruel act of aggression, humanity, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Another person, you know, it's just business as usual, you know, so.
all the villain in someone else's story. And by whose code do we judge the righteousness of one's anger? Corax and the 19th casted themselves across the galaxy, blazing a trail from war zone to war zone, bringing worlds into imperial compliance for the Great Crusade. Corax began moulding his legion on the principles and tactics he had learned upon Deliverance, to his Terran and Deliverance-born sons. The Raven Guard were masters of stealth, embracing covert tactics over brute force. To the thousands of hostile Xenos and non-compliant worlds, they would find their defeat planned with a masterful stroke. Superhuman-sized warriors would emerge from the shadows in lightning-fast raids, led by a figure that could be barely glimpsed by the human eye. Corax's personal combat prowess was staggering. Armed with his lightning claws, he was the Raven, an omen of death, as none could match his speed, combined with his ability to mask his presence. Numbering amongst the greatest duelists in the Imperium, even amongst his brothers, the Legion and the Primarch fought non-stop for decades. Where they could, Corax and the Legion minimized civilian casualties as much as possible. The tactics reflected the man perfectly, but not all saw its wisdom. Horus, the first found son, loved by all, had tension with the Raven Lord. The Battle of Gate 42 was forever in the conscience of Corax, as a newly appointed War Master Horus was eager to show results following his ascension. Horus utilized the Raven Guard in a frontal assault, whilst the other ally legions finished off the enemy. It was
Seems strange, you know. I mean, granted, like you said, Horus is trying to, you know, gain favor. This is his first battle campaign, whatever you want to call it, after being named the War Master. But you would think that, you know, realizing the tactics that the Raven Guard uses, that they aren't meant to be like a frontline kind of squad. They're meant to be kind of a more hit and run, recon, ambush, you know, assassin kind of utilization. So, but maybe it was a situation where there weren't any other legions available, and this is the strategy he had put for him. You know, so this is what he had to do. But it seems strange that he wouldn't want to utilize them in a way that best suits their skills. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe he was just testing them in some way to see if they could do what he wanted, or it was a way of him to test their loyalty to him. You know, I don't know. Interesting.
Whilst the other ally legions finished off the enemy, it was counter to the legion's ethos and tactics, and many of Corax's sons died because of Horus's vanity, seeing people used as tools, cruelly wasting life. Perhaps Corax saw a hint at the behavior he despised from the tyrannical tech guilds of his homeworld. He swore never to fight besides Horus ever again.
Interesting.
But for all the Raven Lord's noble qualities, there is a darkness to his light. Down in the prisons of deliverance, the boy was raised by people who were oppressed. Many people whose crime had been having a different opinion. People who were destitute. And people who were just born there. They were angry. They wanted justice. But many wanted vengeance. Corax's genuine desire for justice was always followed by the shadow of vengeance. It burned him when the guilty avoided the justice he thought they deserved. His sons Agapito and Bran loved their savior, their Primarch, but were cowed when Corax's anger overtook his strategic mind. Over the Great Crusade, many Raven Guard would be...
That again is something that he and Conrad kind of have in common, is they kind of have this rage that kind of takes over and kind of gets them to act, I guess, against their better judgment. Or I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to phrase it, but essentially you get the idea. You know, it acts against their better nature, goes against what it makes them do things they wouldn't normally necessarily do because of, you know, how angered or enraged they are. So, interesting.
The cost of this weakness, this thin line between justice and vengeance, scared him because of the grisly reminder of his dark potential, his dark mirror, the Night Haunter, his brother, Conrad Kurz. Conrad echoed his brother in ways that terrified Corax. Their skin shared death's pallor. Their eyes were sinister orbs of ink. They were both guided by a sense of justice, but one a liberator, and the other a torturer. Both dominated the shadows, calling them home. Conrad was a reminder to Corax what he could have easily been without the love shown to him as a boy, and also what he could still be when his inner monster was unleashed. For all of us, it is our light that most frightens us. We fear standing out. We fear taking the steps to be the best versions of ourselves. But it was his dark that most frightened the Raven.
Just fan 5. Well, I mean, you think about it too, like when you're a Primarch and you have the kind of abilities, strength, speed, intelligence, you know, that a Primarch would have, like the things that you'd be capable of against, you know, Astartes, let alone normal people, you know, things you could do would be terrible. Like, yeah.
Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door. bird or beast upon the sculpted bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore.
Lorgar's grey eyes danced with the light, despite the strain on his body. The opposite of chaos is not order, brother. It is stasis. Lifeless, unchanging stasis. With a last grunt, Lorgar's strength gave. Quivering hands could no longer keep his brother's weapons back.
Here it is,
Corax promised in a hiss, his saliva flecking Lorgar's eyes and cheeks.
Here is the death you so richly deserve.
The claws reached his brother's face. Slowly, the metal burning hot, they sliced over Lorgar's golden skin, inch by inch, blackening the golden flesh, cutting into the meat of his cheeks. Even should he escape, he would bear these scars until the day he died. He knew this, and did not care. The psychic fire wreathing them both flared in response to Lorgar's pain. Corax closed his eyes to spare his sight, and instinct cost him his quick victory. Lorgar threw the Raven Lord back again. Illuminarum rose, ready to strike, before a burst of smoky fire launched the Raven Lord up from the soil, to come down on Lorgar from above. The Wordbearer smashed the first claw aside, striking the fist with enough force to shatter the gauntlet completely. But even as the scythe-long claw blade span off into the surrounding melee, the second claw struck home. Meter-long talons sank through Lorgar's stomach, the tips glinting to the side of his spine as they thrust from his back. Such a blow meant little to a Primarch. Only when Corax heaved upwards did Lorgar stagger. The claws bit and cut, soaring through the Wordbearer's body. Illuminarum slipped from the impaled Primarch's fists. Those same hands wrapped around Corax's throat, even as the Raven Lord was carving his brother in half.
For the Emperor,
Corax breathed, untroubled by his weaker brother's grip. Lorgar crashed his forehead against Corax's face, shattering his brother's nose, but still he could not free himself. The Raven Lord gave no ground, even as a second, third, and fourth headbutt decimated his delicate features. But he lied to us. Lorgar spoke through lips that produced more blood than language. The claws jerked, snagged against Lorgar's enhanced bones. Corax tore them free, inflicting more damage than the first impaling had done. Blood hissed and popped as it evaporated on the force-fielded blades. Father lied, Lorgar said again. He was on his knees, hands clutched over the ruination of his stomach. Corax's black eyes gave nothing away. He stepped closer, his one functioning claw raised to execute his brother. Do it, Lorgar snarled. The psychic wind, the misty fire, all were gone now. He was as he'd always been, Lorgar, the 17th son, the image of his father, the one soul in 20 who never wished to be a soldier. And here he would die, at the heart of the battlefield. The foul irony of the moment settled on his shoulders, feeling grotesquely apt. He couldn't move his legs. His body was a temple to nothing but pain. He could barely even see his executioner, for his psychic efforts had left him quivering with both weakness and a vision-blurring ache in his mind. A faint outline met his gaze, the blurred image of scythe blades raised high. Do it! Lorgar screamed at his brother. The claw fell and struck opposing metal. Corax looked to meet eyes as black as his, and a face as pale as his own. His claw strained against a mirroring weapon, both sets of blades scraping as they ground against each other. One claw seeking to fall and kill, the other unyielding in its rising defense. Where the Raven Guard's Primarch's features were fierce with effort, the other face wore a grin. It was a smile, both taunt and mirthless, a dead man's smile. Once his lips surrendered to rigor mortis.
Corax,
Said the other Primarch.
curse.
Corax said the name as the curse it was.
Look into my eyes and see your death.
Said the progenitor of the Night Lord's Legion.
Damn.
Horus had betrayed the Emperor. He had betrayed them all. And with him, 3 more legions had risen their flags of treachery. It was unthinkable. Corax had no love for Horus, but he respected him. He was the best of them. The Raven Guard, Iron Hands and Salamander legions were dispatched to the Istvan system to bring the traitors to heel. It was legionary against legionary, Primarch versus Primarch. The battle began. A symphony of violence so overwhelming, it was like the very universe was ending. The greatest soldiers of humanity fought tooth and nail, surrounded by explosions and fire the size of titans. Warriors clashed, drowning in the mix of mud and blood. Corax and his Raven Guard attacked the traitors' flank, each side suffering heavy casualties. The first wave had struck the traitors in their entrenched position, and now prepared for a retreat to cycle in their reinforcements. The Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion and Wordbearers stood upon the hill to their rear, and as the Raven Guard approached, dragging their wounded and dead behind them, they voxed their brothers, glad to see them. But an eerie silence fell between them. Something was wrong. A lone flare shot skyward, exploding in a hellish red glow, and the 4 legions fired. Corax had seen numerous, untold atrocities in the name of enlightenment, even himself being a part of conflicts he was not proud of. But for the first time in his life, Corax cried. The Raven...
You know, I can only imagine if, you know, whatever the Amazon, 40K show cinematic universe ends up becoming, whether they do the Horus Heresy or not, if they do, or if they even just, reference it at times with flashbacks or whatever throughout the various shows, because they say it's cinematic universe, so that implies they're going to do more than one show. I can only imagine what the drop site massacre is going to look like if they do it. And just seeing it done from different perspectives, from the perspectives of the Traitor Legion slaughtering their brothers, from the perspective of, Corvus Corax here, who I'm pretty sure his legion, him and the Salamanders, I think, had suffered the most losses. They were pretty much decimated. I think there was only like a few hundred Raven Guard left after this, if I remember correctly. Like, they were pretty much wiped out. So, like, I don't know, I could just imagine, what it would look like and how it would go. But yeah, it's just crazy to think about and what it would look like. But anyway.
But for the first time in his life, Corax cried. The Raven Guard fell in their thousands as the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Wordbearers unleashed their volley. They were surrounded. Corax leapt from each pocket of the conflict, fighting like a warrior possessed. The Raven Lord flew at the traitorous Astartes, trying to buy space and time for his sons. Thousands fell to his lightning claws until he saw him. Lorgar. Corax on his metallic raven wings thrust himself at his brother, who was now wreathed in a dark psychic energy. The Primarchs clashed, Lorgar screaming over the sounds of ceramite clashing, justifying his actions. Corax didn't understand. Why? Why were they doing this? What madness has taken you all? Corax overpowered his brother, impaling him on his claw. His anger boiled over, but before vengeance could be his, an opposing claw matched him. Eyes as black as midnight stared back. Curse, the Night Haunter. Corax had Lorgar mortally wounded, but could he take them both? The Raven Lord made a choice and retreated, using his jet boosters to launch himself back towards his sons, a decision that would come to haunt him. The Raven Guard was surrounded. For weeks they were being picked off. The 80,000 strong Legion were massacred to a few thousand, scavenging ammo and armor from the dead. They were chased onto a mountain by Angron and his World Eaters. Corax and his sons preparing to make their last stand, when in their most dire moment, a single cruiser dived into the atmosphere. Bran, captain of the Avenger, had penetrated deep into enemy lines and gunned down to the surface to rescue his legion. Corax and the last 1,000 Raven Guard hauled themselves to safety. The Raven Lord and the Legion were bloodied. Thousands of their friends and brothers lay dead. Each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor of Istvan V. They were betrayed. The Legion was in ruin. Thousands of the children of terror and deliverance were gone. The soldiers who had put their trust in the Savior were gone. Corax was a broken, wounded thing as he pondered weak and weary about the hell he had just survived. He knew he had to think of the Legion, the Imperium, his father. Corax set the Avengers' course for Terra.
Yeah, I mean, what really else could you do in that situation? You know what I mean? Like, you were set up and betrayed, and it really just came down to survival. You know what I mean? Like, you want to enact, you're in a fit of rage, and you want to enact what kind of vengeance you can for your sense of justice. You know, but it eventually comes down to a point of, you know, can you get out of there, and how many of your men are you going to get out of there? Because like you said, I thought they were brought down to only a few hundred left, but he said they went down from 80,000 to a few thousand. So I mean, like, yeah, even still, that's a tremendous loss of life and resources. You know what I mean? So then it's like, what else are you going to do? But, you know, his boy coming in there and rescuing him, like, that's a bold strategy, Cotton. And obviously, I guess it paid off for him, but I don't remember, you know, I know a little bit about Corvus and stuff like that, but I don't really remember what happens next to him. And if he really has much more of a big impact on anything that happens during the Horus Heresy. So, but I guess let's continue the video and find out.
The Emperor's eyes were open, glittering orbs of gold that bored into Corax's soul. Motes of golden energy danced in those orbs, but their look was not without kindness. The Emperor stood, his armor melting away into wisps of golden thread, to be replaced by robes of flowing silver that had cascaded from his body like an argent waterfall. The Emperor stood, seeming diminished in size but not presence by the removal of his armor, forming insubstantial steps that allowed the Emperor to descend as effortlessly as a normal man walks down a flight of stairs. The Emperor reached out a hand, and Corax felt hot fingers upon his brow. Energy flowed through the Primarch, knitting his shattered bones, stemming his pouring blood, healing wounded muscles and organs. The Primarch gasped, filled with love and adoration.
Stand.
Corax did as the Emperor commanded, his strength restored.
I am sorry, Father,
said Corax, dropping to his knees once more.
I know that your labors are important, but I have to speak with you.
Of course you do, Corvus,
said the Emperor. The majesty and power had gone from his voice, leaving only a tone of respect and admiration.
You have endured much to come here.
Corax felt a hand on his arm, and he straightened under the Emperor's guidance. His father appeared less majestic, the light dimming beneath his skin, his face taking on the features of a normal man with brown eyes.
Yeah, I think this is like, maybe I'm wrong, but I think Corvus is like one of the only people besides maybe Malcador, at least in particular of the Primarchs, that has actually seen what would be considered kind of like, I guess, the actual persona of the Emperor, you know, his like what he actually looks like. So,
his face taking on the features of a normal man with brown eyes, while long, dark hair flowed from his scalp.
Is this your true face?
Asked Corax.
I have no such thing,
replied the Emperor.
I have worn 1,000,000 faces over the millennia, according to need or whim.
I remember this one,
said Corax, dimly recalling a dream he had glimpsed when in the glory of battle.
You wish to sacrifice your legion?
The Emperor seemed genuinely surprised.
In what cause?
I do not do it out of woe, but necessity,
explained Corax.
I must atone for the failure at Istvan, for it will tear me apart as surely as my wounds did, if allowed to fester in my heart. Forgive me, but I cannot defend Terra, idly awaiting my fate to come to me.
The Emperor did not reply for some time, his brow creased slightly with deep thought. Corax waited patiently, eyes fixed to the Emperor's face.
I concur,
the Master of Mankind said eventually.
It is in your nature to cry havoc and wreak the same upon your foes. Yet there is no need for sacrifice. I am reluctant, but you have my trust, Corvus. I will grant you a gift, a very precious gift.
Once more the Emperor reached out his hand and laid it upon Corax's head. For an eternity, Corax was overwhelmed by the mind of the Emperor. An existence that had spanned more than 30 millennia tried to crowd into the Primarch's thoughts, sending pain searing through him. In a moment the pain had ceased, the imprint upon his memories a shard of what had come before, the tiniest fraction of the Emperor's being. Still reeling from the psychic onslaught, Corax wondered if this was how the Astropaths felt during the soul binding. Their minds conjoined with the psychic might of the Emperor. Flashes of new memories coursed through his thoughts, blocking out all other sensation. A succession of images burned into his psyche. Corax realized his eyes were closed, and opened them. The Emperor was watching him, waiting patiently for his son to explore the gift he had given him.
You have given me the secrets of the Primarch project,
said Corax. His voice was a whisper of amazement.
The parts that were relevant to the creation of the legions.
Interesting. So he gave him the information on how to essentially make another Primarch. I guess expecting that the Emperor would, be mortally wounded, and that sometime in the future he would essentially return to make new Primarchs, maybe? I don't know. From what I understand, at some point in time, he, Corvus enters the warp, and that's the last anyone sees him. I don't know if he, I think he chases after someone and, he just enters the warp and then hasn't been heard from since. So I wonder if that's a situation where at some point he's going to return and they start making new Primarchs or something. I don't know. That's very interesting. That's something that I didn't know about. That's big. You know what I mean? Let's back that up a little bit here.
Done to explore the gift he had given him.
You have given me the secrets of the Primarch project,
said Corax. His voice was a whisper of amazement.
The parts that were relevant to the creation of the legions, yes,
said the Emperor. He did not smile.
I must return to the webway. My absence will be sorely missed. That is all the help I can offer you.
Corax was broken, both.
So I wonder if those secrets would then like allow him to exploit some kind of weaknesses and the other traitor Primarchs. You know, I don't know. That's very fascinating though. Or if it's just he's entrusting him with the information, like I said, because the Emperor is expecting, like it's a failsafe. If something happens to the Emperor, he could then, you know, raid Primarchs if necessary. I don't know. That's pretty fascinating though.
Corax was broken, both spiritually and physically. He and his sons were shaken by the apocalyptic battle they had just endured. For 98 days they had been hunted by bloodthirsty warriors, but they were not safe yet. It was a nerve-wracking escape for the crew and the survivors aboard the cruiser, the Avenger. Utilizing the Legion's unique reflex shield technology from Kievar, they were near invisible and meandered through the traitorous fleet's blind fire for days, unnerved by the possibility of a lucky shot. Corax sat at the command throne, never resting, vigilant for any course changes or updates. It was upon his lonely throne the Primarch began to ponder. He was filled with regret. Perhaps he should have faced Kurz, Lorgar, and even Angron. It would have cost him his life, but wasn't that worth it? To deny the traitor's valuable leadership in the war?
Survivor's guilt, you know. What if I'd stayed? You know, I would have given my life, but I could have, you know, potentially taken out valuable assets that the traitors had. Maybe I would have killed Kurz. Maybe I would have killed Angron. I would have killed Lorgar. Who else could I have, you know? What other damage could I have inflicted before I'd gone down in the Emperor's name? And would that have made the difference in the salvation of, you know, the Imperium and the Emperor, etc.? You know what I mean? And maybe could have. You know, without those assets, maybe Horus would have had to have gone around different routes of his strategy. You know, he wouldn't have been able to essentially assault Terra directly. Like he did at one point in time. You know, he wouldn't have had as many resources. You know, so who knows? Who knows what kind of a difference it would have made, so.
Or wouldn't that save millions? When he had liberated his home, he had dropped atomic bombs on the planet Kievar. He killed thousands, but he ended the war, saving millions. A deep melancholy cast its shadow over Corvus Corax. He was a Primarch with a superhuman frame, but he willed his wounds not to heal, punishing himself for his perceived failures. He told his sons, "We have no room for hope. We plan and we act. Hope is for dreamers and poets. We have our will and our weapons, and we shall dictate our own fate." Bold words, but devoid of the spirit he had inherited from the people who had raised him. Corax and the surviving Raven Guard made their way to Terra through ever-increasing violent warp storms, and after a grueling journey, they made it to the Sol system. They were met with suspicion, but finally Corax made it to the surface, greeted by Malkador the Sigillite and his brother Rogel Dawn. He demanded to speak with his father, only to be rebuffed. He argued with Dawn and Malkador, telling them that they could not stop him, but they were silenced. A presence entered the Primarch's mind. Corax saw a vision of the Emperor straining with concentration upon a throne of gold, until he opened his eyes. The golden light enveloped the Raven Lord. You can imagine how it feels to stand before the full power of the Emperor, like staring directly into the heart of a nuclear reactor, a roaring mass of unbridled power, but combined with an overwhelming sense of majesty and love. The Emperor healed his son. He filled Corax with hope and purpose again. Corax wanted to rebuild his legion. He wanted to atone for his failure at Istvan. He wanted to fight back, and his father granted him his wish. He granted him the secrets of the Primarch project. He gave him a mental key to the secret gene laboratories deep in Terra. It was a secret Corax had promised to guard with his life, the Emperor making him swear to destroy even his own sons in its protection. The Raven Guard were not designed to fight behind walls.
I wonder why it is that he specifically gave that to him. Maybe it's because, you know, he's such an expert in hiding that he could take those secrets and hide away, only to, again, like I said, potentially return in the future when that information would be needed to, I guess, maybe make some more Primarchs or bring the Primarchs back. You know what I mean? Like maybe with that information at some point in time in you know, the present timeline of 40K, maybe he will return and maybe he'll already bring some of the Primarchs back with him. You know, maybe that's what he's working on, is actually restoring some of the Primarchs. You know, maybe he'll bring Sanguinius back, etc., etc. Some of the dead Primarchs, maybe he'll be able to, you know, it's been done before where they've been able to clone the bodies, but they haven't been able to, you know, reconstitute the soul, the essence of that Primarch back in. Maybe that secret has been given to him and he will be able to do that. You know what I'm saying? So maybe that's how some of the Primarchs will return. You know, I don't know, but that's very fascinating. And it's interesting that he entrusted Corvus with it as opposed to any of the other Primarchs like Dorn or, you know, Gilliman, Johnson, etc. Oh, so obviously the Emperor has some kind of plan for that. So interesting.
Tactics of stealth that swear to destroy even his own sons in its protection. The Raven Guard were not designed to fight behind walls. Their tactics of stealth and hit and run were where they excelled. With this gift, Corax could rebuild the Legion and harass the traitors behind their lines, and also prove to the various worlds of the Imperium that Horus was not invincible, and that the Imperium was worth fighting for. Corax was grateful. He asked the Emperor why did he not sail from Terra to deal with the traitors directly. It was then that the Emperor revealed that this war was about more than Horus, that the true enemy came from the warp, and the future of the species was at stake. Demons. Demons were the true enemy, and the Emperor was fighting them as they spoke. Fighting them within the Eldar's webway tunnels located deep below Terra. This required unparalleled concentration, so the Emperor was locked upon his golden throne. This was a war unlike any humanity had ever faced. For Corvus Corax, the Horus heresy had truly begun. Chaos, the warp, the true enemy. Upon the apocalyptic fields of Istvan V, Corax and the Raven Guard caught their first glimpse of the influence of this true enemy. The Galvorbak, Lorgar's blessed sons, were the first to dive into the Raven Guard lines when the betrayal was revealed. They were transformed, their bodies enlarged, spikes of bone, jutting hooves and knotted muscle burst from their armor. They were like ravenous beasts that took moments of pleasure drinking the blood of the fallen Astartes. This strange influence wreathed Lorgar during the Primarch's clash, and now his father, the Emperor, was fighting it inside the webway located below Terra. It was the Emperor's secret project, utilizing the Eldar's webway tunnels instead of the warp. But this chaos had broken into the webway itself, forcing the Emperor to use all of his psychic might to protect Terra's gates, lest demons overrun it. Corax couldn't understand why had his...
And I think, wasn't it, Magnus. Wasn't it Magnus that it essentially caused that? You know, Magnus was being chased by Lehman Russ's group, was falsely given information to kill them by Horus. And so Magnus tried to psychically warn the Emperor, who was working on this project, and thus shattered a lot of the protections that the Emperor had set up. So then the demons were trying to, you know, invade Terra, and that essentially locked the Emperor in this battle, trying to push them back so we could reestablish these safety protocols to keep the demons from essentially invading humanity, having a portal from the warp directly down into Terra. So I believe that's what happened. So again, it's one of those what if scenarios. You know, what if the Emperor had succeeded in creating a connection to the webway? What would have happened? You know, would it have simply just been a means for humanity to travel safely? Or did he want to essentially like move Terra and into the webway and create a safe planet for, you know, humanity to thrive and create a whole other kind of, you know, civilization in the webway, kind of like how the Drakari have their place in the webway as well. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Interesting what if theorycraft idea.
His brothers allied themselves with entities of the warp. Why did they betray the Emperor and the Imperium? This blindness was something that many, such as his family, Bran, Euphemia, Agapito, and many other ordinary humans who fought with the Raven Lord had come to see. He did not understand that truth was subjective, not an absolute. Take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. Justice was a construct of a subjective experience. It was a Primarch's weakness. Corax believed so completely in the Imperium and the Imperial truth that it shocked him when others didn't feel the same as him. It was the wisest choice. It was the best choice for the species.
I can see that. I mean, you know, being in a situation where you're the Primarch, you're a Primarch, I should say, not the Primarch, but you're a Primarch, and, you know, you trust and believe in the Emperor and the Imperium so blindly that it's like you don't see any other way, and you don't see how anyone else could think any other way either, especially other Primarchs. So, yeah, that, like, would make that betrayal that much greater. And especially, I would assume, coming from, you know, it being Horus, who, like you'd said earlier, he kind of despised because of an earlier situation where Horus got a lot of his men killed. And he has a great love and attachment to them. You know, he very much cares for them. So, yeah, interesting.
Same as him. It was the wisest choice. It was the best choice for the species. And yet many over centuries had refused compliance. His naivety in understanding that some people are just looking out for themselves was a human weakness. Corax, Bran, Agapito, and the now elderly Euphemia were with him, aboard the Avenger, the Gene Seed project in tow, and his surviving Raven Guard and a contingent of Custodes set course for Deliverance and Kievar. They were heading home. This resurgence was desperately needed by Corax. There was a part of him that was damaged since Isfahan, though perhaps it had always been a part of him. This melancholy that many of us have had the misfortune of experiencing, the feeling of being tired with the world. A mind fog that cannot be easily shaken, preventing any moments of joy or happiness. On rare occasions throughout the Great Crusade, an unlucky legionary of the Raven Guard would find an overwhelming depressive state would envelop him. His hair would darken, his skin would pale. Something within would meld stronger with the gene seed of Corax. Only death or fierce constant battle were the only options for release. It was this part of himself that Corax feared the most, the part he had told his father he was most afraid of, the part which could turn him more into his dark counterpart, Curse. The Gene Seed Bank gift was more important than Corax would ever realize. Arriving back into their home system, the Legion reunited with the garrison upon deliverance. Only 4,000 Raven Guard existed in the galaxy, but that number was going to change. Arduously extracting the specific gene seed from the Gene Seed Bank, Corax could create legionaries with the maturity rate of a Primarch. Decades could be shortened to months. The experiments continued for weeks inside the training fortress, the Raven Dell. 500 aspirants underwent the new process, combining with the gene seed of Corax, and the results were incredible. Fully fledged Legiones Astartes emerged in a matter of weeks. Though lacking true combat experience, they were the future, the salvation of the Legion, and Corax's mind. The process for 2,000 more began, but it was not salvation, but disaster that lay upon the horizon. The escape from the bloody fields of Istvan was a miracle. Bran and Euphrenia aboard the Avenger bursting through a gap in the enemy lines. It was almost too good to be true. The fact that the Avenger should have been garrisoned back upon deliverance had not escaped the Primarch's mind. Commander Bran knew the Primarch would not take well to the truth, that dream visions had been the source of his rescue. Corax's melancholy was obvious to one who had known him his whole life. Upon returning, the Primarch had even murdered a wordbearer captain who had been with the Legion for decades upon deliverance following the Edict of Nicaea. Corax told his sons he could smell the taint on him. This melancholy seems to lift with the success of the first 500 new Astartes, donned the Raptors, but all went to disaster with the next batch of 2,000. Corax's suspicion of Istvan had been well placed. Alpha Legion Astartes, upon the killing fields of Istvan, had infiltrated the survivors of the massacre, grafting the skin of the Raven Guard's fallen comrades onto their own. These hidden agents struck in tandem with a rebellion exploding upon Kievar. Corax's words, to bring peace to both the world and its moon, and to heal the wounds of the past. It was the words he gave to the Emperor when they first met. But the wounds upon Kievar and its previous Tech Guild masters had not healed. They had festered. Another failure that struck at the heart of Corax. The disguised Alpha Legion operatives tainted the Gene Seed Bank, and the results were disastrous. The new 2,000 recruits began to devolve and mutate. Young Astartes, recruits from Deliverance, gave themselves to their home's savior and
so the Alpha Legion, infiltrated and corrupted the process so that they couldn't make any more. Wouldn't that also, I guess, technically mean that secret of making the, how to make Astartes quicker, wouldn't that potentially have been leaked then? Would Alpharius, would the Alpha Legion then have that now? You know what I'm saying? Because if they were able to get close enough to infiltrate the Raven Guard and get to the laboratory where they're creating, the new Astartes and corrupt the process, you would think that they would have enough time to essentially see the process over and, extract that information, that they could then take it to their own Legion and do, what they want to with that process as well, creating more Alpha Legion Astartes quicker and or to other you know, of the traitor legions.
Recruits from Deliverance gave themselves to their home's savior and followed their ancestors into service, joining the legendary Raven Guard Legion. Men like Navar Hef were excited to become superhuman warriors in the service to the Imperium, but spikes of bone, scales, feathers, and other mutations began to manifest. They were monsters. Some were so devolved that they had to be locked up. If this disaster was not enough for the distraught Primarch, a force comprising of the rebellious tech guilds attacked the Legion. Corax once again went to battle with the very people who had enslaved his family. The fighting was furious. Corax leaping from zone to zone, crushing the enemy, but it was a bluff. The Alpha Legion's true goal was elsewhere. The tech guilds were just a distraction. The Raven Delve, the Gene Seed Bank, was left exposed. Corax was furious. He intended to go to the Raven Delve himself, but Bran begged him not to, saying that he was prepared to destroy the Raven Delve to prevent the Guilders from gaining the Gene Seed. But he could not whilst his Primarch was inside. Corax's son stood up to him. He saw in a reflection his face contorted with anger and hate. He looked like Curse. His chance to rebuild the Legion was gone. His chance for vengeance against Lorgar and his treacherous brothers was gone. His escape from melancholy was gone. But Bran's words tempered him, tempered his lust for vengeance. Corax trusted the mission to his sons, and they all rose to the occasion. Navar Hef and the other mutated recruits locked below the Raven Delve heard the fighting and burst from their quarters and fought off the Alpha Legion operatives, throwing themselves at them without armor or weapons, using their fists, claws, and sheer will to liberate the stronghold. The Raven Guard won, but their hopes of rebuilding was lost. But this war was not over. Corax stood before the 4,000 last Raven Guard. Even his mutated sons stood in their midnight armor. They could still fight, still show the colonies of the Imperium that they were not abandoned to Horus. The Sons of Deliverance brightened their father's darkening heart, and Corax vowed to destroy every warp-tainted creature in the galaxy.
That would be quite the task. So, I mean, yeah, like, you would think that, okay, the Gene Scene project failed. You're back on your planet. It's been infiltrated, you know, and has been racked, and everything there on your home planet seemingly has been, well, at least everything, I guess, of worth as far as recreating your Legion has been taken or destroyed. So, like, you would think at that point the play would be to take as many of your men as possible and I guess go back to Terra, right? You know, I mean, what else can you do other than add what little numbers you have to the defense of the Emperor? You know what I mean? Unless you can figure out a way to correct the, you know, mutation process that has been, you know, set in the corruption that the Alpha Legion set in the process, and, you know, go to other worlds and find other recruits, etc., and rebuild your numbers that way. Then you know, you would think the only other play would either, well, it would either be go back to Terra and add your numbers to what's inevitably going to be a large battle there, or I guess do what you can to disrupt the supply lines and hunt down any of the other traitor Primarchs and try to kill them too. You know, those would be your only really other options at this point. So I don't know, maybe, I guess he would have more use going around attacking the other Primarchs with his hit and run tactics and potentially hunting them down and eliminating what he can of them, or at least making their lives more difficult as they're trying to approach Terra. You know what I mean? Maybe he would have more value doing that. You know, I don't know. It would definitely suit his skill set more, but it also, you know, with the fact that you are so diminished in your men and your capacity to do anything, you know, I don't know.
We have been touched by forces beyond the Emperor's own design. You know this, brother, as well as I do. No good comes from that which in evil is born, no matter the purpose or cause. I look at Kurz and see myself. How could the Emperor create such demigods with science alone? Warriors that can withstand tank shells, leaders whose every word must be obeyed, creatures with powers far beyond any Thunder Warrior or Legionary. Why do you think the Emperor decided not to simply recreate his children when they were lost? What unique gifts of darkness did he...
That is a good question. You know, why not, if the Primarch's taken from him, why not just recreate more? Obviously, there was some kind of secret in the process that was very difficult and time-consuming to replicate, which lends to the idea that there's some kind of, you know, did he actually, you know, did the Emperor capture, you know, unaligned demons, greater demons potentially, and take their soul essences, whatever, and merge them into these bodies to enhance the Primarch's abilities already, you know? And if that's the case, what does that say about the Emperor? You know what I mean? Like, to be a psyker of such great power, to have been around for such a long time, is he himself not essentially a greater demon, you know, in human form? Or something else that has taken human form, you know? Who knows? Who knows?
Children when they were lost. What unique gifts of darkness did he pass to you? I used to think there was righteous justice.
He continued, his gaze moving from Russ to the warriors at the doorway.
That whatever I did, it served humanity. There is only one way left to aid mankind, and it does not include our survival, O King of Wolves. This is not our universe, and it never was. You cannot create legends and myths in a laboratory.
Other faces were in his memory, vying for attention, demanding that their messages be remembered.
You often spoke of the Fenrisian notion of a good death,
said the Raven Guard.
If there is such a thing, I desire it. I should have taken it on Istvan. Time and again fate presented me with opportunity, but I denied it. Against Kurz and Lorgar. I could have ended their vileness. And Angron. How many has he butchered since I fled his axes? Rational, sensible decisions, weighing advantage and cost each time. But mistakes. All. The universe does not want us. It is unnatural that I survived.
He sighed, thinking of Marcus Valerius and the red sash he wore so proudly.
Visions. Visions sent by the Emperor? I think not. Something else guided those that rescued me. Another hand moved my warriors to intervene at Istvan. Powers that we do not willingly serve still bend us to their will through the manipulation of others. I was not meant to survive Istvan, and all that has befallen us is simply a correction of that failing course.
Corax paced slowly to the first cell door on the red level. He paused for a moment, repulsed, and driven on in equal measure. It had to be done. Inside, he found a creature crouched in the corner, its skin white beneath clumps of thick black fur, its eyes round, ebon discs that stared at him without any obvious intellect. Even so, he could not ignore the similarities, the pale flesh and the dark eyes. They had fought the war, and they had won. Now was the time to put right the assertion he had made to the sorcerer Natherkin on the forge world of Chonstax II.
I have made several oaths in my long life, but I have been careful to swear only those I could fulfill, except for one.
He told the beast. He crouched next to the pitiful thing, and it shuffled closer, comforted by his presence, though the sight of it broke the Primarch's heart.
One I now think may be beyond me. I looked into the face of our enemy, into the heart of the force that had corrupted them. I knew that, even if we killed Horus, that power could not be eradicated completely. Chaos will return with ever greater strength if we allow it. If we give it the vessels it seeks, and feed the ambitions that drive the weak to its embrace.
Corax recognized the adoration and trust that radiated from the deformed raptor. He laid one massive hand upon the former legionary's head, and the fingers of the other curled around his throat. The creature's mouth worked a few times, and drool dribbled over Corax's hand and fell to the floor in thick gobbets.
I remember everything, and I remember my exact words before I sent that fiend back into the warp vortex that had birthed it.
Tears stung the Primarch's eyes.
I promised him I would destroy every warp-spawned, chaos-tainted creature in the galaxy before I die.
The mewling, growling thing that had been Navar Hef met his gaze.
And I have always kept my promises, my son.
Damn.
Corax and the Legion fought back.
I mean, yeah, think about that, you know? You're having to kill, essentially, what would be one of your children, you know? He's been mutated and changed through your actions to what was supposed to be, you know, an Astartes that bared your gene seed, and now he's some kind of unrecognizable creature, you know? Rough. It's rough.
Back. On his metallic... Corax and the Legion fought back. On his metallic raven wings, he led his sons on a lightning campaign behind the traitors' lines. The worlds garrisoned by the traitor legions found danger in the shadows. Out of nowhere, Astartes in black armor, some with monstrous forms, cut them apart. Any chance of fleeing was met with a demigod figure that appeared from nowhere. Worlds were liberated, and by the time the traitors had learned of the assault, the Raven Guard were already at their next target. For years, Corax and the Legion fought in the shadows, but the cost of the heresy over time began to weigh heavy upon him. He learned more about the enemy, Chaos. He despised its corruption. He hated it. So when he learnt the truth about himself and his brothers, it cut deeper than any physical wound. The Primarchs were creations of science and the warp. Corax hated part of himself. The surety of the Imperial truth that had guided him to raise worlds was a lie. Weak and weary, the Raven Lord pondered his place in the galaxy. As the fires of the heresy crescendoed, Corax found his brother, Leman Russ, and his Space Wolves under siege. They too had been decimated by the traitors over years. They too had sons that had been transformed by the influence of the warp. The Wolfen, to match Navar Hef's mutated raptors. It was at the moment of near defeat. A ghastly, grim Corax lamented to his comatose brother. He should have taken the death offered upon Istvan. He had failed his people. He hadn't avenged the massacre. His naivety had cost lives. He was a creature of the warp. His desire for vengeance was almost consuming him. Though both the Raven Guard and the Space Wolf survived, the darkness never left Corax. News came from the Sol system. After 7 brutal years of conflict, the heresy was over. The Loyalists had won, but the Emperor was crippled and was interned upon the Golden Throne. Corax felt heavy, carrying the burdens of trauma and failure that not even his family could lift. Something that became worse as he had one more promise to fulfill. The second batch of raptors, sons like Nevarhef, had been mutated by chaos, but they had fought side by side with their father and brothers throughout the heresy. They gave their blood, sweat and tears for Corax. They deserved more, but over time they were getting worse. They were devolving, locked away as they began to fall to frenzy and madness. Over 1,000 of Corax's brave sons were in pain. With tears in his eyes, he kept the promise he had made to destroy every warp-spawned, chaos-tainted creature in the galaxy. Corax killed them, one by one, with his bare hands. The responsibility was his. The Raven Lord was a giant, a powerful demigod figure, but everyone has a limit. Corax locked himself in his personal chamber in the Raven Spire upon deliverance, begging daily for his father's mercy. For an entire solar year, the savior of deliverance locked himself away from his sons, none able to bring him out. As the Legion held breath for what felt like an eternity, Corax stepped out of his chamber. A year to the day he entered, something had changed. Perhaps the determination the people of Deliverance saw centuries ago had returned. Corax left the world alone, his midnight black eyes locked upon the warp storm, the Eye of Terror, and he gave his last words to the Imperium: nevermore.
Pretty interesting that, you know, both he and Conrad kind of had, you know, like a mental breakdown kind of a situation. Whereas, you know, Conrad's was based on the fact that he refused to admit to himself that he was a bad person, essentially, and that all the torture and killing that he did because he enjoyed it, not because there was another better potential way of doing things, even though he knew and just refused to admit that to himself. Whereas, you know, Corvus, he's really kind of burdened with survivor's guilt almost, you know, feeling like he really should have died on Isstvan 5 with his brothers. He should have stayed and fought, killed Logar, killed Conrad and Angron and anyone else he could have got his hands on, and maybe his death would have made the difference in what happened. You know, instead of the Emperor being what he is now, maybe he could have prevented it potentially. And he could have prevented his sons from being, you know, these mutated creatures that, while served him, he had to eventually, you know, destroy them, which again, it kind of goes back to that attachment thing that I was talking about at the very beginning of the video, and how, like, you know, one of the big differences between him and Conrad was because he grew up surrounded by people that loved and cared for him, supported him, and helped him. And in turn, he obviously wanted to return that. You know, he loved and cared for and wanted to support and take care of them. And in the end, he wasn't able to. You know, a lot of them were killed at Isstvan 5, and then a lot of them he had to eventually kill because the mutations were taking their hold and evolving them into these, you know, creatures that were potential danger to others and themselves. So he ended up having to essentially kill them as well. So it only made him go further. And it seems that his only salvation or recourse was essentially to keep that last vow that he gave to go and destroy any and all creatures of the warp. And then also him finding the truth of the fact that they are part of the creatures of the warp, you know, made him hate himself, just kind of how Conrad hated himself. So very interesting.
Forks of black lightning leapt from an outstretched hand, rippling through the body of a word-bearer, greasy smoke issuing from a rent in the war plate. The legionary collapsed.
"We have to fall back across the portal bridge,"
said Kaltar.
"We must fetch Lorgar."
Fetch Kaltar.
The voice came from behind them, as pure as molten gold in the dark apostle's soul. Its tones lifted his spirit in an instant, filling him with warmth. He turned, as did the others around him. The archway glowed with power, showing a vista of a gigantic citadel cathedral through the haze within its black frame. In front stood a gigantic figure, thrice the height of the legionaries, a golden-skinned entity wrapped in a cloak and robe of flame-room shape that swirled from its body. In one hand it wielded a wickedly spiked mace that throbbed with black power. The other bore a rod of intricately wound metal, tipped with a three-eyed skull, layered with golden sigils that constantly weaved about each other. Eyes of uniform azure burrowed into Kaltar.
I heard your woe, my son.
The voice washed through the dark apostle like a soothing balm, stilling his agitation, strengthening his resolve. Still, the presence of his Primarch was near overwhelming, and he fell to his knees, head bowed.
"My Lord Aurelian, forgive my weaknesses. A creature of demonic spite has disrupted the great works here."
I see no demon.
Kaltar glanced back towards his brothers. The entity that had pursued them had reached the top of the hill amid a storm of bolter fire. It cast legionaries with sweeps of glittering claws, leaving tattered remains draped across the stonework of the outer shrine.
This is no demon.
Lorgar raised his rod, beckoning to the blood-stained whirlwind tearing through the last of the Dark Apostle's warriors.
Come to me, brother.
With a last flurry of activity that turned another legionary to shards of ceramite and ribbons of flesh, the apparition coalesced into a recognizable figure. It was of equal height to the demon Primarch, clad in black battle plate with long taloned gauntlets. A pair of wings stretched out from its ornate backpack, fashioned as intricate metallic raven feathers. The face was as pale as snow, gaunt, the eyes as dark as coal, framed by a shoulder-length black hair. Kaltar felt his breath dying in his lungs as he looked upon the unmistakable features of Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard. A flurry of questions flooded his thoughts, but all remained unanswered as the Primarch spoke.
What has happened to you, brother?
I have ascended,
said Lorgar. He indicated Corax with a twitch of his rod.
I might ask the same of you.
The Raven Lord strode forwards, intent on Lorgar Aurelian. Kaltar and his warriors scattered before him, grateful to be free of his wrath. Marduk and his coterie closed about the Primarch, but a look sent them away.
I am what I always have been,
said Corax.
I am vengeance incarnate. I am justice delivered. This place beyond the veil has revealed what we all are. Underneath the veneer of humanity our Father crafted for us, we are of the warp.
Have you come to make an oath to the powers that are your true creator?
No. I swore to destroy all chaos taint from the galaxy. You will be the first fallen brother to die beneath my blades.
I am not the creature you fought at Istvan,
said Lorgar, raising his mace.
Nor am I.
Kaltar barely followed the lunge of Corax, so swift it was. A black wind threw him aside as dark fire crackled from the rod of Lorgar, with a thunderous shockwave that hurled the word-bearers to the ground. The two demigods clashed.
Damn.
The Raven Lord pondered, weak and weary, but never more. the boy from Deliverance who had been embraced by an oppressed people. People who filled him with an innate sense of justice, to a young man who learnt to master stealth in the shadows of a prison. Promising to free the people who loved him, the young man had friends and family, but he always felt different. He was the savior. He was surrounded, but alone, until a figure wreathed in golden light descended from the sky. His father, the Emperor. He completed him, and he gave him all he needed to fill the hole in his heart. The man became a Primarch to the Imperium of Man, trained by the best of the Imperium, believing with every fibre of his being in the Imperial truth. He took his people to the stars, and they fought the worst the galaxy had to offer. But Corax's human weaknesses slipped through. The resentment of the people who had suffered was reflected within him. He despised opulence. His need for justice skirted along the edge of vengeance. It was an anger that would bubble to the surface in his worst moment, always fearful of becoming like his brother Curse. He was honourable, kind and fair, and was filled with purpose, until he lost nearly all of his sons upon the field of Istvan. His spirit was damaged. A melancholy gripped him, dragging him down to that sunken place. But he kept moving forward. He found a way to rebuild his legion, a way to rebuild himself, and erase his feelings of guilt for surviving. But this hope was taken from him when his sons were corrupted, and the Legion's future could not bring him atonement for his failures. But his sons were there for him. They fought the betrayers with the last of their strength for years, as the fires of the heresy raged on. But then he learnt the truth, that his foundation upon which he had condemned worlds, the Imperial truth, was a lie. Demons were real, and a part of him was of the warp. He'd already hated his own failures as a man, but now he hated his very being. As the heresy drew to its close, his father was gone, forever locked upon his golden throne, just when he was most in need of guidance. Then his raptors, his mutated sons, who had fought throughout the heresy despite their corruption, began to devolve. So he put over 1,000 of his sons out of their pain, bearing the responsibility of another failure. His limit had been reached. The darkness had overcome him, and he lay in that mind fog, wallowing in the despair caused by centuries of pain and suffering. But something changed. A universal truth found him. The truth that is inside all of us is the capacity for change. He let the fear go. He embraced what he was. He was a creature of the war. I am vengeance incarnate. I am justice delivered. He could be the vengeance of the Imperium. He could be the justice that the traitors so richly deserved. Here lies the Raven Lord, hunting down his treacherous brothers as a shadow in the war. A creature of justice, leaping from the darkness. Nevermore would he suffer treachery. Nevermore would he fail anyone. Nevermore would he fail himself. Nevermore would he let justice go undelivered. Nevermore.
Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Nevermore.
And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
There we go. There we go. Another great video by the Amber King. As always, links will be down below in the description to this original video by the Amber King without my commentary and reaction, and to the Amber King's channel. I would ask you to do me a favor and click those links, and if you enjoyed this video of his creation, go over there and give this video a like, and just check out his channel, see what other videos he's got over there you might be interested in taking a look at, and give him a sub. You know, give the man some support. For the most part, I've really kind of already given my thoughts about this video and Conrad, or I mean Corvus and Conrad, essentially, in their comparison. They're very, you know, similar characters. It's just one was given love and support and had connection early on in his life, and that kind of molded his sense of justice, versus another who his sense of justice was essentially built on kind of just punishing essentially those that he felt deserved to be punished, and taking pleasure in that punishment, essentially. But you know, the Corvus saw the darkness in him and pretty much always fought against it, whereas Conrad relented to that darkness, is essentially the difference, the big difference between them. Both of them went through great tragedy and loss, but one just essentially didn't really give into the darkness versus the other. That's really kind of the big difference between them. And again, it could just be a lot of because of their different upbringings, you know, and what happened to them. But very great story, very great story. I do the biggest question from this video again is I wonder, you know, he was given the secrets to the Primarch project and he was able to, you know, essentially create rapidly other members for his legion so that he could build his numbers back and go out and get revenge. And then obviously that was tainted by the Alpha Legion, etc. But he still has I guess technology, not the technology, but he still has that knowledge essentially. So were he ever to return and be, you know, were he ever to return and be given the proper facilities on Terra, or maybe work with Cole essentially, you know, would he be able to bring some of the other Primarchs back? You know, not just clone them, but actually return their full essence, you know? But from what I understand, he just essentially is just going around the warp and just killing things, essentially. So, but I do feel like with them bringing a lot of the Primarchs back in the present time, he'll be one that will probably return. I guess the question is what state will he be in? How will he have changed? Will he still be, you know, a good guy or not? You know, will he still be part of the loyalists, or will he have been turned in the warp somehow? You know what I mean? Who knows? So, but great video by the Amber King. Great video by the Amber King. If you would like to, we do a lot of these reactions live. Unfortunately, YouTube was not cooperating with me today, so I ended up having to do this offline. But if you would like to, there's a join button somewhere down below this video. You can click it and see if any of those YouTube membership tiers that I offer have any interest to you. You can come and join in a lot of discussions that we have during these reactions. There's a Discord that's open to everyone if you would like to join that. and some other things. So take a look at all that, see if that has any interest to you. I appreciate you guys just hanging out and watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and it helps the channel grow. And yeah, I just appreciate you guys taking the time to come in and hang out and check out the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're having yourself a wonderful day whenever you're watching this. Take it easy, and I'll see you guys on the next one.